Shout out to all my students in the Spiritual Ecology Course. It's your boy Ian here today to drop another lesson on David Abram's book, Becoming Animal and Earthly Cosmology. And everybody who's following along, hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, because I am trying to change the ecological consciousness of the world. And maybe the least that you can do is maybe leave a subscription, because this course is not just going to be going deep into environmentalism. There are going to be hundreds of courses in the next 5 or 10 years covering thousands of books, thousands of different topics, deep dives into everything, a mile wide, a mile deep, because I have the depth I need to become and to share greatness with other people, literary greatness, hopefully, which, people like David Abram give to us. So today we are talking about, I think, chapter 5, depth. If not, it's chapter 4, depth. And what is depth? Because we're not just talking about depth perception. We're talking about escaping the world of representations, which is even a bigger wormhole to get into. So everybody, once again, how is everybody doing? Before we get into today's presentation, maybe leave a comment. Tell me how you've been liking the course, or if you're new to the course, go check out the intro video if you are new to the course. That'd be probably a better place to start. But each video is good content as standalone content. So, oops. You guys can see what's going on behind the scenes. Boom, there we are. So we're talking about depth, everybody. And this is just a quick summary and preview about what we're going to be talking about today. Depth being teaching us and showing us, for us trying to build, us people, you and I, who are trying to build this new phenomenological consciousness around nature. Depth is very important. And one of the things maybe isn't seeing is easy. Once you can go out and feel and see, it does it automatically. But we can't if we don't first escape the world of representations in our common non-natural life, unless you're living out in the woods right now. So to do that, we have to learn to develop a natural vision. And when we start to do that, we're going to realize that we have more energy, and that our depth and our natural vision equals health, that it's correlated to our body, like we were talking about last chapter. And last but not least, we are going to talk about going a mile wide and a mile deep with our perception, because a lot of people go a mile deep and an inch wide, and that moniker is not true. That will help you if you're just trying to make some money and live a mapped out lifestyle. So let's get into the text, everybody. The text starts with, and we're just going to be talking about that. He starts off, David, with a very nice section on hiking through the woods. And when he's hiking through the woods or hiking down a mountain, he starts entering the woods, and he could see all the nooks and crannies. But then once he's down there, it starts getting more confusing, right? Because, I'm sure you've had this happen before, especially if you've gone romping through the woods. You don't know where you're at, and it's exciting. He says that's one of the best ways to get back into the primal consciousness is to get a little bit lost, to not know where you're at, because I have to go down this way, but you don't know what you're going to hit. Even if you do know, you're just hoping that you hit the road. What if you're that one person that misses the road and keeps walking and then is lost? And if you're that person, just stay still and they'll find you. And this starts to, our connection to this, though, this primal consciousness, this idea of us moving down and even noticing these things is eliminated by screens. And we'll get into more of that later. But the process, though, when we're walking, so pretend I'm walking down into the forest. He uses this term motion parallax, which I think is great, because when you're walking past things and they look like they're moving, but it's really you that's moving. Like a parallax on a website. It's really you that's moving, not them, but it appears the other way around. And this is one of these co-creative relationships with nature, that nature can actually be moving too. A tree can fall, birds can chirp, the wind can move leaves. An earthquake can happen. There's a lot of different ways that Earth can actually become an animate object. But there's always this motion parallax going on with us, which I think is a really cool concept and something for you guys to notice while trying to gain this phenomenological consciousness when it comes to nature. And it starts getting weird when we're in this world of perceptions, because in representations, this doesn't exist. And a lot of us, sadly, are in here right now having to live in the world of representations. But, and the worst part of that is, sorry, the worst part of that is that we are locked into the system. That now the system is basically here, and we have been ingrained, and our science and our technology and architecture and how our society is built is based around 4D models and AI and things that aren't. And let me explain what that field of vision is. There is a certain mystery when you enter a canyon, for instance. And these people have lost their sense of perception. But when we enter a canyon, for instance, and I live in the desert, so this is my natural terrain, you get consumed. You can't see out of the canyon. And then there's all these nooks and crannies that you could never find. Like if you look up here in the middle of the photo, these little caves and even small little caves and small little portions of canyons within a canyon that you can explore. And it's actually a really great thing. And you can actually get a lot of privacy, even if you're near a city or something in some of these canyons, because you feel like you're in your own world. There is nothing around you. And you actually are in your own world. And not having access to canyons it's kind of a weird thing to me, at least, because they're just so cool. And the depth with you in the land depends entirely where you are standing within that terrain. As you move, okay, and this is a quote: the depth of a terrain, the relation between the near and far aspects of that land depends entirely upon where you are standing within that terrain. As you move bodily within that landscape, the depth of the scape alters around you. So there is this animate relationship happening around us, but we might be walking with our headphones on or thinking about other things. And that's what starts to happen is when we look at nature. If I'm out there looking at nature, I'm looking now at a representation of nature, because nature is not something that I can look at and hold on to, because it is an invisible, permeable landscape that is animate. So being able to still image that is actually a logical fallacy in and of itself, which was also I've felt that forever, but David is putting these things in a great way. And I got an email the other day, and someone said, I already know all this. Like, David, this guy is just like doing this in a pompous way and blowing it up. And it's like, maybe, yeah, let's say he is. What are you doing? You figured it out. Anyone can figure this out. Our ancestors figured all this out. All you have to do is be out in nature and dedicate yourself to that a little bit. Anyone can figure this out. But who's going to share this? Who's going to sit their butt in the seat and become a good enough writer, and you know how to market it and pitch it out there? And then you need it seems like this publisher's name is Vintage, publisher to tango, and then it's got to get into our hands through a bookseller. There's all these different steps here that you maybe don't want to be involved with. But if you want to wake up people's ecological consciousness, we have to do more things like this. Protests aren't going to do it, but having content that's accessible for everybody at any time, that's fun and playful, is, I think, the best solution. So when you see things as a representation, though, it starts to create problems. And that's what's actually happened in the past 2 years with so many people being, remote and traveling around, is that we see the Instagram culture and people are just driving from place to place and missing actually a lot of stuff in the middle, because they just were like, wow, I want to go see all these different states in these 2 weeks or do all these things. And they don't realize that, one, they're doing it for an aesthetic. And, if they actually cared, they would have been doing this the whole time. And then once 10 years from now, are they going to be doing it? The real OGs keep doing it. You're an OG because you have been in the game for a long time and never have, gone away from the game. So another experience where this happens, and once again, you guys get the candy metaphors, is a full moon over the city. Have you ever been driving? This happens all the time with me in Las Vegas as I'm driving, and suddenly, boom, right over, the the east side of the valley, the moon is just coming up, and it's like, oh my God, it's insane. And, I'm sure you get so big, and, it's really cool sight to see over a city, as, nasty as cities are. It's one of my favorite things. So that's another example that David talks about. But I think his best example, which he connects to his sleight of hand magic, is, and has anyone ever been skiing? So this is the Tetons where, I've lived and spent a lot of time. And, when the clouds cover you while you're skiing, that's when deja vu happens. And you could see a whole valley, and 20 minutes later, you can't see a thing. You might be able to see 6 feet in front of you. And you have to kind of know where you're at. And if you don't know where you're at, you're just hoping that you're going the right way. So I think that is a pretty cool concept when it comes to skiing. And just in general, that you could be watching a mountain like David was using it as a beacon of directions, and then suddenly it's gone. That's happened to me too. I've been in my own city before, and I used to ride my bike down to my college. Like, I had to ride like an hour and a half every day through this wash. And one time it was so cloudy, and I was twisting through this wash, and then I get out, and I'm like, where am I? Like, what direction is what? Like, I'm gonna keep following this trail, but I have no idea what way northwest and south, all the different directions was. I had a good idea, but also that's happened to me when I've taken naps out in nature. One time I, took a little and took a big nap out on the ground in the desert at like 1 a.m. and woke up and it was all cloudy outside and I couldn't figure out where I was. I was like, I knew where I was at, but I was like, whoa, where do I go? Because like there was lights, because I was kind of on the outskirts of town. There were lights in a couple different directions. So yeah. So this shape-shifting is happening all around us every single day. Even when we're moving through houses, there's motion parallax with cars walking past, things in your neighborhood. And this phenomenological logical awareness brings us back to life. And then once we have that down, then we can begin the internal journey, because the internal journey creates vertical people and not flat people. And that's what David starts to talk about, is screen thinking and flat thinking. And I've talked about this in my video, Dragon Smoke by Robert Bly. And that's on Robert Bly's essay on poetry. But he talks about vertical versus horizontal thinking. And horizontal thinkers are people who stare at the screen, who stare at their neighbors, who, read the same books and never ascend and descend in their life, because that's where all the magic happens, up in the heavens and down in the hells. That's where life and contrast and metaphor grows out of. So living in a flat world, and even in a flat world such as the Midwest or somewhere where you don't have that much variety, or living in a city where it's all flat except the forced perceptions, it starts to mess with you. And it's also actually a health issue, because shifting your sight is actually good for your brain. If I leave my house right now, I can see a bunch of mountains outside of Las Vegas, and I go out every single hour and look for at least a minute or two and adjust my eyes to all the different mountains and look around, so that my depth perception can get some practice, because that's what my animal senses do. Right now, the furthest I can see in this little room is only a couple feet, 5 feet that way. That never happened when we were living in nature. That's not how our eyes work as animals. We always were having variation, especially as mammals. And we're seeing this world through a world. And, he had an interesting talk about focus. And, how cameras for movies do it for us automatically. But when it's up to us, we have to do it. But even our concept of focusing has been taken over by movies. And, I thought another cool thing was a quote: "There's no depth between you and those creatures, since you stare at them from a position entirely outside of their world." And that's true when you're watching a nature show or something. It's never the same. You can never get that feeling. I always feel a little bit weird and a little jittery when I see like the penguins or something on planet Earth or whatever weird show. I'm like, I could go see this out there. Like, there's ocotillo and sagebrush and, just shrubs out in my desert. That's enough for me for a lifetime. And wherever else I move, that will be fine too. And it's not to say I shouldn't, you shouldn't see more, but like whatever's there is fine. And a lot of people don't get that. And that's why a lot of people kind of live an odd life, because they care too much about, like, I know, have you heard, like, so many people love the mountains and they want to move to the mountains, or I live in the mountains, but they never go out and do anything. They have no real connection. They go on, weekly Instagram hikes. And it's a joke. And, like, I hate to get on everybody, but, like, you guys have to make your own statement in this world. If you've experienced enough of nature, it's sad, but you have to get back into the world of flatness and try to get people out. Like, that is your duty as a lover of nature. And you could be Thoreau, man, you could be a Kaczynski if you need to, but we don't need that anymore. Like, the time is over with, because eventually, a couple generations down the line, there will be no more solitude. And it's up to us to be able to create that. So the land never ends, though. Like, this isn't a scene about nature. You know, when you go out into the world, that's the other problem that people get in with perception and depth perception and flatness, is that you go out here and you get, maybe let's say you're in this valley down here on the lakeshore. You look out and you can see some trees and maybe some buildings and stuff, but you can't see valley after valley after valley. So you just see this as a representation of reality, of this objective place in reality. And that's a problem. And that starts to create problems I'd like to talk about right now. So the first problem that happens is viewing the world from an outside objective angle. And that happens through screens, because we're seeing screens, we're seeing this world, but we're not seeing it for what it is. We're not seeing it for its depth and what it does. And who wants to do that? Who wants to view the world from an outside objective angle? A lot of people, all the people living in suburban houses that never go out. There's this whole hundreds of millions of people just in the United States of America. Most of the people living in America are living in this objective, detached world from nature. They are not in the senses. They are not there connecting with their natural surroundings and feeling it. It's gone over their heads. And I get why, because they have misaligned values and misaligned desires and impulses. With our planet as it might, quote, with our planet as it might seen by a transcendent God or by a surveillance satellite. That's what happens with this drone view. And when we become disembodied from screens and disembodied from through too much screen use, and then start viewing the world from this objective angle, the world starts to become a permanent in that way. Suddenly the natural world does not exist anymore. And then it makes it easier for us to push through stuff, to destroy the natural world, because we are not connected with it. We don't understand that the shrub and basin that we are getting, building over here is the same that someone in a different country, different state, different continent, that's happening to them. There is no hierarchy when it comes to stuff. Of course, you want your area of town or whatever to not be trampled on or abused, but someone else's is. And once that happens to you, then you'll realize and be a part of the fight. Like, that's happening to me right now. Like, the desert I grew up in never got developed, a lot of it. And now there's just these multi-billion-dollar developers coming in from, foreign countries, and just there is no remorse. And it's going to be built far and wide on territory where beautiful animals live and have lived forever. And it goes right to the line. It's so funny that we have this thing called the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, and the local Native American tribe sold off their land to get exchanged for some other land in more in the city. And suddenly now developers can build right up to the edge of the boundary. Suddenly they can come right to the edge of the boundary. And of course there was a cash incentive in that deal. And it's like, what is the point of boundaries? Because when we have boundaries, then people are always going to build right to the boundary. And it's sad. There's going to be little houses right until the edge of this boundary. And it's just so much space and so much love out there that I've given it, at least. I guess no one else has. I live out where they explode nuclear bombs for tests. So who knows anymore, right? Like, who knows what a valid opinion is and a value connection with nature? But it's from these people. It's from the disembodied people who are looking at topographical maps and who aren't out there. Because I'm out there every day and I don't see anyone out there enjoying themselves. At most, there's maybe someone shooting, maybe someone off-roading, but no one's walking around and absorbing that. And I'm the last defender, I guess. I'm the last stand. And it's sad that I'm going to give up. I'm not going to tie myself to the tractor because, and I guess, and I haven't done enough. Like I said, maybe the last video or somewhere else, I should have known that this was going to happen. This is obvious that they're going to keep building, and you have to get in the fight early before it's too late. So, if you're young, if you're doing something and you know that there's a certain area, start now. Start, building something, teaching people, handing out pamphlets, talking to the congressional people who are running. I really don't believe in that, but, if they're going to be making these moves, who owns this land? What's going to happen? Where is the line? Where is this property line that they're going to push to no matter what? Oh, man, it's freaking frustrating, man. So when we do this, as Abram says, quote, we dispel the trickster-like magic of the world. Look at this photo in New Mexico, man. There's a certain energy to the world, everybody. And when we become disembodied from it, we can't actually experience it for what it is. There's no mystery left then. If we have this permanent view, if we can use 4D vision and drones and see it, and we have screens, and then when we actually go out there, we view it as a simulacra. There is no more depth. And we can't move on or live without this depth now, though. So it's like we have to keep moving into this world of depth if we want to continue on this technological progress, which maybe I don't know why we need to do that. But if we're going to, right now, we're not doing it through more of a wild mind. And David talks about the concept that we dwell on earth and not on it. And I thought that was a really good way to end things, that the earth and depth is going to continue. And he asks, is the earth, are the clouds moving around us? Like, is that spinning with the earth too? And and that last section was beautiful. The last couple pages, everybody, go check those out. So for today's journal assignment, I would like you guys to write, first of all, as always, 100, 200 words on a certain passage or concept or something that came to you, about this topic. Like, if you want to write whatever you want, if you want to, that's fine. But for everyone who's stuck, I would like to talk about the changing realities in nature out there. When you're out in nature, maybe spend some time or think about when you've been out there. What is that changing, shape-shifting reality? What does that mean for you? If you acknowledge that had a personal impact in a positive way on your life, what would that be? How has that helped you form? What is the purpose of that in your life right now? Because that is, I think, a good question to ask in terms of phenomenological awareness, because we have to see what its utility is. When we understand something utility, we'll probably be more apt to use it and understand it more. And these other ones were like understanding your house. That seems logical. But understanding depth is a little bit more abstract, but it's not, because we're starting to understand contrast and metaphor and mystery. These are all things inside us too. We're not just our outside bodies. We're not just these flat people. We have vertical depth that goes deep. And we maybe learn that through nature. We learn that in the cracks. We learn these things in the hidden realm, the okatare, hidden from the eye, right? So write about that, everybody. Thank you guys for being here. Peace.